I would hope, fellow victims of introspection. Today's video is a bit of a strange one because I feel like usually I will wrestle with a topic as long as I need to find the answers that I want to provide, but I don't really have so much answers to provide today as questions. I have some answers, but nothing I'm completely satisfied with. I guess I should just talk about the subject of the video, which is Whiplash. It's a song that I have sort of mixed feelings about. I don't like it as much as other people do, but I certainly don't hate it. It's a very strange song to me. I kind of grapple with it, and at the same time I had looked at the lyrics at some point, so I know that I was aware it referenced the poem "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," and I thought that that was great because that might be my favorite poem of all time. It changed my life. That's not a joke. So it was very interesting to me that it referenced that. At the same time, I didn't think about it too deeply until a few nights ago when I was like, why does it reference "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night"? Because when I was taking notes on like what I wanted to talk about, I described "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" as, in my mind, emphatic, like the thrumming of blood, not aloof. You know, Whiplash is a song where they seem very aloof. They're talking about being the coldest. "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" is about not wanting your parent to die, like really wanting your parent to hold on to what they still have of their life when they are near death. So it's a very intense poem. And I just question, like, why do these things go together? Do I have the answers? Not necessarily. I might be too close to this personally to get the answers, which is why I'm bringing it to you. But there are a couple things I want to talk about just because all I do is talk about K-pop and literature. So, like I said, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" is about death. You know, do not go gentle into that good night. Do not die. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Live. At the same time, Whiplash, it feels like it's about newness. You know, they talk about their new era. They talk about day one. It seems like things are changing, whereas "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Night" is quite literally about, like, please remain here. Please remain in this living realm with me. So it feels very different. There's also the idea of like raging against the dying of the light, and throughout the song there are references to like flashing light, red light. They also talk about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, the idea of just closing your eyes, breathing in, and visualizing. The light does not seem to be dying, and they don't seem to be fighting for it, which I find interesting. There's also the idea of forking lightning. The original poem says, "The wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning. They do not go gentle into that good night." So there's an idea of these men realizing that their lives did not have the impact that they wanted them to have. They did not have any meaningful words. They did not do anything meaningful with their lives, and now they're near death and they still haven't achieved any of the things that they want to achieve. And the way that Whiplash talks about the subject is very different. Like I said, it's very aloof. They're talking about like there are reasons you'll never understand. Come on, focus, think fast. Like it's talking down to the subject a lot throughout the song. And that is just very different vibe-wise. There's also, they talk about when they do reference "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" in the song, they say, "I found the right light, won't go gentle into the night." So it's the night versus that good night, which feels very different. I've talked about how when people implement the word "that" in their phrasing, it feels like there is a different amount of accessibility going on. It feels like there is some distance being put between whatever the speaker is talking about and the reader. If we're going to talk about smaller details as well, I do think that, and this is more regarding the music video, I think it's interesting that the poem talks about the sad height. I believe the line specifically is, "And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray." So they're talking about this sad height, and I feel like it's interesting how there's part of the song, or of the music video rather, where Ning Ning is on this elevated platform. You know, the part where Giselle takes out the strange heel of her shoe. She's on that elevated platform, and then later she's on the ground, like fully laying on the ground with like a glass in her hand and just laying there. I think it's interesting to point that out. I think it could be a reference to that part of the poem. I don't know. That was just my first thought when I was rereading the poem and thinking about the music video. I also think, and this has less to do with the poem, but there does seem to be a lot of cerebral absurdism throughout the song, just because like the very concept of like one look given whiplash, that's very absurdist. It's not, it's very dramatic, but it's not something realistic, and it's not meant to be. It's just playing on a very absurd idea in a very dry way, which is very absurdist. Sorry, my dog is noisy, but I do think it's important to point out that a big part of absurdism is the idea of taking away rules, taking away forms of logic and rules about logic. I think that that is very fun. And I do think that the idea of one look giving you whiplash is very illogical in an interesting way. And it is very much based around cerebral sensations, the cerebral realm. I actually have a video in the works about the Perfect World music video rather, and absurdism, because absurdism is something that I am very passionate about. It's something in literature that I love so goddamn much, especially the theater of the absurd. Oh, it's the best. But I think it's also important to talk about the idea of morality being tied into this, because they talk about one look given whiplash, which involves eyesight. There's also the idea of closing your eyes, breathing in, and visualizing, like I was talking about before. There's a certain, I mean, I've talked about it many times before. When you talk about eyesight and visuals in literature, there is an association with morality, just because it's like a classic symbol for a very morally conscious person to have some kind of blindness or other inhibited eyesight. So I think tying in that, the idea of just one look and closing your eyes, I think it's interesting because the speaker does not seem to be one that is particularly morally conscious. At the same time, maybe that is why this poem is tied in, because I was going to talk about the line where they're talking about cats copying them, and I do think it's interesting to have an allusion in a K-pop song, because a lot of the time people in the K-pop community will have a really big problem with things like allusions in K-pop media, just because they'll say it's plagiarism, it's copying, all of this. It's like you can't allude to anything, which I think is such a terrible problem we have, because I think intertextuality is so valuable in all literature, which K-pop to some extent is literature. And so I think the idea of being able to allude to this very famous and significant poem is a good thing, and maybe that does speak to a certain amount of morality that is being introduced in a way that is very, like, it does contradict, what I'm saying is it contradicts a lot of the themes of Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, but that kind of shows you how they're not copying. They are very much weaving intertextuality in a way that is very appropriate. I guess that wasn't necessarily the most clear way of explaining it, but I hope that made sense. And I just think it's a very interesting song. Even though I don't love it as much as other people love it necessarily, I do find it very interesting, and I think I'm going to keep thinking about it just in case I have an update and I've discovered more things about it. I think that'll probably happen. So if you really love this song, I mean, first of all, tell me if you have any interesting thoughts about it, but also I might talk about it again. I probably will. Let's be honest. I am constantly talking about these things. So, I hope this made sense. I don't know if I was entirely clear throughout this video. So if there's any confusion, just let me know and I'll try to clarify. But if you're a victim of anything, I hope it's of introspection. Bye.